Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we will discuss 9 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. The topics are as follows. In the first topic, as India's Act East policy has completed a decade of its journey, we will try to examine how successful it has been in the light of India's Prime Minister's visit to 2 Asian nations. Then in the second topic, we will try to examine the status of income inequality in our country and the steps which can be taken to curb it down. Then in the third topic, we'll ponder upon a question that why we cannot create jobs in agriculture sector itself. Followed by the fourth topic, where we'll look into the Supreme Court's observation on the idea of Bulldozer Justice. And finally, in the fifth topic, we will learn about that what constitutes a non-banking financial company. Towards the end, there will be news snippets to help you excel in the prelims examination as well, so stay tuned. As the Indian Prime Minister has embarked on the journey of 2 Southeast Asian nations, that is, Brunei and Singapore, the India's Act East policy has come into limelight as it has completed a decade of journey. Thus, in this particular section, we are going to review India's Act East policy, which forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the theme of India and its neighborhood and the groupings which affect India's interest. Keep this in mind at this stage that in the 20th ASEAN Summit, which took place in the year of 2023 in Jakarta, Indonesia, the Indian Prime Minister has said that these Asian groupings forms the central pillar of India's Act East policy. The question which arises here is that what do we mean by ASEAN? The ASEAN, or the Association for Southeast Asian Nation, is actually a political and economic union comprising of 10 Southeast Asian nations, which traces its origin from the year of 1967 when with the Bangkok Declaration or the ASEAN Declaration by the founding members, the first 5 founding members were whom? They were Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand and Philippines. So these founding members, they formed a grouping to enhance the social, the cultural as well as the economic aspect of their relations to create regional peace. And this grouping of ASEAN held its first summit at Bali, Indonesia in the year of 1976. With the joining of Brunei in the year of 1984, it has further expanded to a 10-member nations as we see it today. The later additions has been the Myanmar, the India's neighbor, Laos, Vietnam, Brunei as well as Cambodia. The headquarter of this ASEAN is in Jakarta, Indonesia, and its official motto is one vision, one identity and one community. This ASEAN grouping, which actually constitutes of some of the fastest growing economies in the world, the economic might of it can also be assessed from the fact that it constitutes these 10 nations 6.5% of the global GDP as per the World Bank's report. Now, obviously, we have understood that it is quite economically important. So, what India has done to evolve our relationships with ASEAN? The story starts from the year of 1992 when we actually established the diplomatic relations with the ASEAN. And then in the year of 1995, we became a full dialogue partner of the ASEAN nation. The first ASEAN-India summit was actually held in Phnom Penh. After that, it is being actually held on the annual basis, right? Can any one of you guess that this Phnom Penh is actually the capital of which Southeast Asian country? Then in the year of 2003, there were actually quite important economic agreements which we started signing with ASEANs, such as, for example, the ASEAN-India Framework Agreement on Comprehensive Economic Cooperation. And finally, in the year of 2005, India also joined the ASEAN-led East Asia Summit. East Asia Summit is basically a grouping which is actually led by the 10 nations of the ASEAN and its 8 dialogue partners in the region of Indo-Pacific. The 8 dialogue partners are your China and Japan, New Zealand and Australia, USA and Russia as well as India and the Republic of Korea. Then comes the fateful year of 2010 when finally India signs the free trade agreement with ASEAN. And in the year of 2012, we upgraded our relationship with ASEAN to become a strategic partner of it. Then in the 2014, we appointed our first Indian ambassador to ASEAN. And by the year of 2022, keep this in mind that we have become an important security connectivity partner of the ASEAN region, specifically in the region of Indo-Pacific because of the India's role as a net security provider. When we have understood about the evolution of this particular region, one thing which you guys might be observing is that India has taken proactive steps, right, to enhance our relationships with ASEAN. The question arises that why? Why ASEAN is even so important? Now imagine that you guys have got two uncles. One uncle who gives you a lot of blessings to clear this examination. One uncle who gives you a little bit of pocket money to help you in your preparation. Which uncle you will be closest to? So just like our normal relations, the international relations are also guided by a very important factor, and that is the economic angle. And this is where the ASEAN comes into play because it acts as a gateway to the Indo-Pacific market. Because it controls the very strategic Strait of Malacca. The Strait of Malacca, which basically connects the Andaman Sea to the South China Sea. And this Strait of Malacca has been historically important as well. So you guys can actually recall from your history lecture that how in the year of 1025, the Rajendra Chola, he actually invaded the Sri Vijay Empire, the Sri Vijay Empire of Indonesia. What was the reason? The reason was that the Sri Vijay Empire of Indonesia was actually trying to control this Strait of Malacca to monopolize its trade with the Tang dynasty of China. Thus, this reason is very important. Why? Because it is acting as a gateway. The gateway to the Indo-Pacific market. What potential Indo-Pacific market has for our country? The Indo-Pacific market has got 65% of the world's population, 62% of the world's GDP, 46% of the world's merchandise trade takes place in this region, and world's container trade of 55% also happens in the same. Thus, it offers to us a very rich and lucrative market, just like how ASEAN is also a crucial economic bloc for India. The reason being that with a GDP of $3.2 trillion combined and with a population of 650 million and more, it is actually the world's third largest market, obviously after India and China. Also, collectively, these 10 countries, they form the fifth largest economy in the world, and they constitute to 11% of India's global trade. The ASEAN-India trade in the fiscal year of 23 stood at $122 billion. When we have understood the economic importance, there is also the economic contribution of Singapore in solely basis, the country which our Prime Minister is going to visit next. What Singapore offers to us? Singapore is the 8th largest trading partner of our country in the whole and the largest trading partner of our country in the region of Asia. At the same time, Singapore is also the second largest source of foreign direct investment in our country. So as highlighted by the Hindu article yesterday, these two nations which our Prime Minister is visiting, it stands as a kind of a contrast because Singapore is our largest trading partner in the region. Brunei is actually our lowest trading partner in the region and 117th overall. Even the FDI which we get from Brunei is very low, just 67th. So now these two countries which our Prime Minister is visiting, obviously we will be focusing upon to increase our trade relations with Brunei and further strengthen our trade relations with Singapore. The next is obviously the strategic interest which we have in the region of ASEAN, obviously to counterbalance the dominating China in the Indo-Pacific and to safeguard our commercial interest obviously around the regions of Strait of Malacca, because we will want to ensure that the trade in this particular region actually works upon the rule and order, and the navigation is based upon this principle, the principles which are led by the provisions of UN clause. Also, we'll further try to enhance our role as net security provider in the region, to create an integrated economic and political space, obviously to rival the China's Belt and Road Initiative in this region. And ultimately, this region is very strategically important for us to enhance our connectivity with the Northeast. What is the reason for that? Because the Northeast is actually connected with the mainland India with just the Chicken Neck corridor. What if this corridor gets compromised? At that stage, these Southeast Asian countries like Myanmar and Thailand, they can become our gateway to get back the control of the region of Northeast again. So it is very strategically important for us as well. That is why India shifted from its look east policy. It discarded that and adopted the Act East policy in the year of 2014. When at the 9th East Asian Summit. Now, under this Act East policy, what we have done? So first of all, we have tried to strengthen our trade relations further, to enhance our trade with the region under the Free Trade Agreement which we signed in the year of 2010. For that purpose, an ASEAN-India Business Council has been created. Then we have elevated our relation to further security enhancement by becoming a strategic partner of ASEAN region in the year of 2022. And to further enhance this trade and security partnership, India has taken series of steps to increase the connectivity with the ASEAN region. So you guys can actually recall here the India-Myanmar-Thailand trilateral highway which we are creating. Or for example, the Kaladan Transit Multimodal Port which we are creating in Myanmar. So now I am taking the name of one country again and again, Myanmar. So obviously you guys can guess one issue which we are going to discuss later related to ASEAN, which will be associated with this country. The next is that we have further tried to enhance our technology synergy. Why? Because these digitalizing countries of Southeast Asian nations, they actually provides our country a great opportunity for our IT services as well as our startup ecosystem. So what we have done in this regard, what steps we have taken? So for startup, we have created an India-ASEAN Startup Festival altogether. For this IT services, we have created a joint science and technology development fund with a corpus of $5 million. Then, in the 20th ASEAN Summit, from where we started our discussion, which took place in Jakarta, Indonesia, India has taken two important steps to enhance the cooperation. The first is the cooperation on maritime safety. So, under that, what we are doing? We are trying to enhance our cooperation in the field of disaster assessment and service provision, for creating the search and rescue operations in the region, for creating a joint early warning systems. With this, what we are trying to achieve? We are trying to control the piracy in the region, the human trafficking, the smuggling of the drugs, or for example, to control the illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing which take place in the region of Indo-Pacific. Also, we are trying to create the blue economy, to jointly fight the battle of climate change, to reduce down our carbon emission. For that purpose, we are trying to create green maritime infrastructure, as well as we can put impetus jointly on renewable energy productions. Also, to further enhance the security initiatives, we have created a joint ASEAN Defense Minister meeting with Indian Defense Minister, as well as ASEAN is the part of India's Sagar initiative, which stands for security and growth for all in the region. So we can see that how there has been several proactive steps in this direction under our Act East policy. Now let's see that how it has fared over the years. The answer is that there are various challenges which are actually hindering the cooperation with the region of ASEAN, the central pillar of Act East policy. The first is obviously the trade imbalances which actually emerged under the Free Trade Agreement of 2010. So just look at the increase of India's export under this free trade agreement from 2010 to 23, that was a meager 1.7x. However, the import from the same region, that actually increased by 2.9x in the same time duration. Thus, India is incurring around a trade deficit of $43 billion with this particular region. Why this trade imbalances has taken place? The first major cause is the tariff asymmetry. So while India has reduced the tariff on 74% of the products which we import from the region of ASEAN, the ASEAN countries has only reduced 56% tariff on the various product lines. So obviously it is not reciprocating the kind of efforts which we are taking. Also, there are various kind of non-tariff barriers, such as, for example, very strict regulatory requirements for any kind of product, or sanitary or phytosanitary barriers. There are various technical trade barriers which are imposed on our goods, because of which reason, obviously, our export is not increasing as much as we envisaged. Then this reason of tariff asymmetry and trade imbalances played a very important role in India backing off from the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which basically involved all the East Asian Summit nations, right? The ASEANs and its 8 dialogue partners. It was about to create the world's largest free trading area, right? But why India backed from it? Because just look at the trade deficit which it had with the countries of RCEP, such as, for example, China, Asia, South Korea, Australia, Japan, obviously China being there as well. So they might have used this free trade agreement policies, and they started dumping their goods in our country. So we were fearful of that. Also, there were various industries which started asking the government to not sign this agreement. And that is why this Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which came into fruition in the year of 2020, India did not sign it and not became the part of it. Keep this in mind here, that this RCP, it constitutes currently of 30% of the population of the world, as well as 30% of the GDP of the world as well. And many a times the Asian leaders has actually kind of requested India to join RCP, even very recently. The next challenge is obviously the rising manufacturing competitiveness which these countries are posing to our trade prospects. Such as, for example, just look at the Vietnam's growth in the textile exports. From being 23 billion in 2013, in the last 10 years, it has reached to $45 billion. Even Indian companies are buying these textile products from Vietnam. In comparison to that, what has been the India's growth? From a meager 34.2 billion to 36.3 billion, just registering a growth of 6%. In comparison to us, Vietnam in the same time has registered 96% growth. So many of these Southeast Asian nations, they are actually registering lot more growth than our country. The next is obviously the rising issue of China's wolf warrior diplomacy, where it just solely relies on its own interest, and that is why it is trying to assert itself in this region of Indo-Pacific, specifically in the South China Sea under its 9-line policy, where it is trying to control these strategic regions by claiming that they are part of its exclusive economic zone. So obviously a lot of Asian nations are actually getting into confrontation with China, such as, for example, Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia, etc. Now keep this in mind that when China is trying to assert itself, there is another major player in this region. Who is that? USA. Now Philippines is trying to incline with USA in this region to counterbalance China. USA's interest is what? It wants these Asian countries to act as a geopolitical buffer in this region for its economic interest in Indo-Pacific. At the same time, does all these countries are jointly refusing to follow the China's line? No, because there are various countries like Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, they are actually virtual dependencies on China, right? Because of the debt trap policy, they have taken a lot of debt from China. So there is a China's angle as well, China-USA angle. In this, obviously, it becomes very difficult for us to remain neutral position. At the same time, there is a rising internal dissension among these Asian countries itself. Such as, for example, there was a diverging stand on 5-point consensus which came in 2021. So when there was a military takeover in the region of Myanmar, there was a kind of a 5-point consensus. But many of the countries like Thailand, they started bilateral negotiations with Myanmar at that point of time, thus violating this 5-point consensus of ASEAN. At the same time, it is because of this kind of, parochial approach which are being taken by the Asian countries, it is actually violating the Asian centrality. The Asian centrality, which forms the core component of the Article 1.15 of the Bangkok Declaration of 1967. Then there is issue related with the Asian way. The Asian way is basically that we will not interfere in other countries' policies, the other Asian countries' policies. But because you are non-interfering, many of the time you are actually allowing the major players like USA and China to guide your country's policy, as can be seen from the USA's guiding of Philippines or China guiding of Myanmar. then obviously all of these issues are having a spillover effect on the infrastructure push which India was trying to do in this region, such as for example creating this Kaladan multimodal transit project which now has been stalled because of the military takeover in the Myanmar. So we are not able to establish ourselves so firmly as we were actually envisaging earlier. Thus, there is the certain kind of way forward which shall be taken. The first is obviously to create the Quad Plus, where with the Quad grouping we can also include the Asian nations, right? Can any one of you just comment down like which countries are actually the part of this Quad? Then we can actually re-explore our Buddhist and Tamil cultural roots. So you guys can actually recall from the Ramayana panels of Borobudur temple, or you guys can recall the various Tamil inscriptions which are found in the region of Sumatra. So we need to establish or enhance our cultural roots. Also, we need to or we can inaugurate a kind of a master connectivity project in this region, aligning with the ASEAN's master plan connectivity of 2025. And further, we can create a joint manufacturing hub as well as a green energy partnership to further enhance our relations with ASEANs. With this, we have reached to the end of this topic. Do try to attempt this question. If possible, comment your answer. We move to the next topic. The editorial today highlights the issue of rising income inequality as a serious global challenge and offers some innovative suggestions to tackle the same. These challenges associated with income inequality forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the larger theme of issues related to poverty and hunger. Now, the father of our constitution, B.R. Ambedkar, when he was debating in Constituent Assembly, he said that this income inequality is a vital force which can actually hinder the economic development across the country. The reason which he gave was because this income inequality can actually lead to very few people possessing everything or all the resources, and many of the people just left with few resources to propel their development. The question arises here that this income inequality, is it even a major concern? Because on social media, everyone seems rich and happy. Now, to assess this income inequality, we are going to take the help of World Inequality Lab report of 2024, according to which the 1% of our population, that 1% of the population, the top 1% which we have, they have got the income share of 22.6% of the total national income. And the top 10% has got the income share of more than 50, that is 57%. So what the bottom 50%, which includes me as well, what we have got? We have got the income share of meager 15%. So as per this World Inequality Lab report, India has actually entered into a billionary Raj, which is actually guided by the modern bourgeoisie or this capitalist class, this top 1 and top 10%. Keep this in mind that as per the report, the inequality which exists in our country right now, it is actually worse than when we were under the colonial rule, because when we got independence in the year of 1947, the top 1% at that time, they were holding around 11% of wealth, which you guys can now see it has almost doubled. So happy Independence Day, I guess. The report also shows that if we compare the income inequality in our country with the other countries, the India, if we just look at the top 10% wealth, the income share which they have, that stands at around 57%. So, is there any major economy country which has got more inequality than us? Yes, that is South Africa, if we are looking at the income share of top 10%, because in South Africa it is 65%. However, if we just look at the income share of top 1% in our country, that is 22% of the total national income, we stand at one of the world's most unequal country in the terms of income distribution. The question arises here is that why? What is the cause of income inequality? So obviously the factors can be indefinite. In this particular section, we are going to focus only upon those causes which has been highlighted by the today's editorial. So it states that the wealth accumulation by the crony capitalists is one of the major factors. The crony capitalist, which actually works upon the principle of market monopolization and profiteering. So for example, there is another article in today's newspaper which actually tells us that how the Google has got 90% share, or it controls the 90% of the digital market. So thus the CEO of Google, that is Sundar Pichai, he is earning just a meager income of $226 million a year, while you are using the same Google services to sit at your home unemployed, taking pride in abusing a random person online. Now what does this crony capitalism leads to? It leads to accumulation of wealth. The wealth which is actually passed from one generation to another, thus causing intergenerational inequality. At the same time, these crony capitalists, they have actually become much more profiteering or making more profit after specifically the kind of free hands which they have got after the liberalization, privatization and globalization reform of 1991, after which we started putting much more impetus on the private sector. One of the example being that the corporate tax rates, how they have been cut to a drastic low. The next is obviously that because of the free hands which this crony capitalist got, it ultimately transpired or further aggravated by the inadequate labor policies which we have in our country. For example, the Social Security Code of 2020, it has just remained a tiger on the paper itself. At the same time, there is a major issue where the majority of the workers in our country, first of all, we have got 90% informal economy. So anyway, 90% of the workers do not fall under any specific social security net. At the same time, there exists no uniform minimum wages, minimum or maximum working hour a week. This kind of infrastructure or security provisions for the majority of the worker does not exist. Thus, it provides an opportunity for this crony capitalist to exploit this particular labor section. As there was a debate which you guys can recall, that how CEO of a major company was actually endorsing 70 hours work week. Then obviously, even let's say as a person from a downtrodden section, if I want to rise the ladder of the social mobility, there exist a lot of barriers for me, and that is inequality in the terms of social mobility as well. The reason can be the various kind of infrastructure loopholes which exist in our health, education, the caste-based discrimination which people face, or in the modern days time, the technological barrier as well. So for example, just look at our beautiful rankings on various important indices, such as for example, in Human Development Index, we rank 134 out of 139 countries. In Global Gender Gap Report of 2024, we rank 129 out of 146. In Multidimensional Poverty Index of 2023 released by UNDP, it states that how 18.7% of the Indian population is still multidimensionally poor. At the same time, in Global Hunger Index of 2023, we rank an abysmal 111. So at one time we are saying that we are the 5th largest economy in the world, and at the same time we also take pride under the National Food Security Act of 2013, under which we provide subsidized food to 75% of the population. What does this indicate? That 75% of the people has to rely on subsidized food. They cannot just go on the market rates. Then there is also the state of inequality in the digital access as well. Just look at the poorest 20% of the households and their access to computer and internet, and then just have a look at the top 20% households. An important and interesting questions here. I have given you some very important reports. How many of you, without taking the help of the internet, can actually answer that these reports are released by which of the following organizations? Just give it a try. Moving forward, so to tackle with these challenges, what the government has done. First of all, the government tried to redistribute the property. So for example, we abolished the zamindari in the 1951, the institution of zamindari which was established under the Permanent Settlement System of 1793 under the Lord Cornwallis. Then the Tenancy Act was passed to actually redistribute the land among the tenants or the farmers who were not got any land. They were cultivating on the lands of zamindar. Then the Land Sealing Act of 1961 was passed, which basically identified a family as a unit of 5 members. And it said that these 5 members, they shall not hold the agricultural land of up to, let's say, 10 to 27 hectares. So 27 hectares is the maximum. And in the terms of non-agricultural land, one cannot hold, this family, 34 to 35 to 54 hectares of land. So this was a kind of a land ceiling which was actually applied on the public. Then the government tried for the financial inclusion of the public by doing what? By nationalization of the insurance sector in 1950. The banks were nationalized in the year of 1969. Why? Because these banks were actually giving the loans to their capitalist friends only. Even in today's editorial, it has been highlighted that how the banks, they actually prefer to give loans to the large capitalists instead of give loans to the small and medium enterprises. Obviously, why? Because here they are giving large loans to the large capitalists. So large amount of interest can be accumulated. At the same time, the collection is also easier. You cannot depend largely on these small and medium enterprises. Then there was a Jan Dhan Yojana 2014 which was launched for the financial inclusion of the larger public by the use of the JAM Trinity. At the same time, earlier the government was also taking proactive steps to tax the rich, such as, for example, putting the high rate of direct taxes, as well as there used to exist a state duty or inheritance tax. So for example, let's say your father bought a kind of a property for you near the highway. But now, because of the highway has been declared there, the rate of property increase. So now the father is very dear to you and he's trying to give this property to you in the will. So you are basically inheriting a capital without actually contributing in the creation of that capital. So the government used to charge an estate duty or inheritance tax on that, which used to be around the 15% of the property rate. However, there arose the problem of dual taxation because the government said that anyway we are charging wealth tax. Then we are charging this estate duty as well. So this inheritance tax was abolished in the year of 1985. Also, to control the monopolization by the companies, there used to exist a Monopolization and Restrictive Trade Practices Act of 1969. However, it was further replaced by much more liberal Competition Commission Act of 2002, obviously after the LPG reforms of 1991. The today's editorial also highlights that because of these socialist steps which were being taken from the Nehruvian era to the LPG reforms of 1991, in the post-independence, the share of the top 1%, it actually declined, reaching close to the 6% mark in the 1980s, but just see after 1991 how it has drastically increased. So, what does today's editorial actually suggest for? It suggests that, first of all, we can actually adopt for progressive taxation. So it says that we shall actually move from economy of scale to the economy of purpose, under which there shall be a progressive taxation, which means that if your income is increasing, the taxes shall increase as well. And then under the provision of Article 38, which establishes our country as a welfare state, we shall actually try to put this money collected from the rich for the welfare of the people to further enhance the skill and education of the vulnerable section of the society. Such as, for example, we can provide large-scale education under the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, under your Right to Education Act of 2020. Then we can provide vocational training under your National Education Policy of 2020 as it envisages. Then it further states to enforce strict labor laws, to provide them minimum wages, to actually restrict the maximum working hours, provide them a kind of a social security net as well. Then we shall invest in infrastructure to reduce the regional disparities. Government is also already doing that. It has launched the Gram Sadak Yojana, the National Infrastructure Pipeline. Now, the article emphasizes upon to promote the idea of trusteeship of Gandhi. So Gandhiji used to believe that the people who have got rich, they have the responsibility and inherited responsibility to take care of the poor people. And for that purpose, the article gives the example of the pledge movement or giving the pledge movement, which has been launched by Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, under which they are trying to convince the super rich to at least donate 50% of their income for the welfare of the poor people. So on the basis of this, just try to solve this particular question and we move forward to the next news. The editorial puts impetus on job creation in the agriculture sector and provides certain imperative measures to reform the agriculture sector. With the title of Reclaim the Farm, the editorial forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the theme of issues with agriculture and allied sector. The debate actually originates from the statement which was made by the Deputy Managing Director of IMF, Geeta Gopinath, where she stated that India needs to create around 60 to 148 million additional jobs between the year of 2024 to 2030. And she said that India shall create this job majorly in the non-farm sector. Thus, the article actually counter-argues. It states that why cannot agriculture be the driver of growth and the creator of jobs? The argument of Geeta Gopinath is coming from the fact that agriculture currently employs around 45.5% of the population, followed by construction 12.6%, trade, hotel and restaurant 12.1%, manufacturing 11.6%. So if we specifically look at the agriculture sector, the employment actually went lowest to 42% in 2018, and since then it has again increased to 46%. The idea is that because of the pandemic, the kind of the economic crunch which was caused, the people has actually moved to the agriculture and they have been employed there as a disguised labor. The editorial today actually counter-argues and states that agriculture has the capacity to actually accumulate this much of workforce and even more. The argument comes from the fact that if we just look at the gross value addition of the agriculture sector, it actually stands at highest in contrast to the manufacturing. So the gross value addition in the agriculture sector is what? 80%. It basically means that if the 100 rupees is being provided to the agriculture sector, it is doing the gross value addition of almost 80 rupees of that, right? So it is saying that the agriculture has the capacity to further enhance its growth sector and to further employ more people. However, at the same time, the editorial, it also highlights that why majority of the educated youth do not actually want to work in this agriculture sector. There are several reasons for that, and that is why they are moving away from the farms. The first is obviously the small and fragmented landholding. So as per the 10th agriculture census between 2015 to 16, 86% of the farmers in our country are marginal and small landholders. So basically they have got the land between 0 to 2 hectares. So because of such small landholding, it ultimately leads to what? Low mechanization, monocropping, where they are just able to grow one crop and mostly to sustain themselves, the deterioration of soil quality because of this monocropping, and obviously the high production cost which is involved and the low productivity which ultimately results. And it results into what? It results into the low income of the farmers. The second is that, okay, let's say even if this farmer has grown a little bit of additional crop on his land and he wants to sell that to make the profit, then that is curbed by the lack of marketing and storage facilities, such as, for example, high transportation cost or the role of middlemen or hatiyas, the commissioning agents. Because of all of that, as per the Food Commission of India, there takes place loss of 16% of horticulture crops and 6% of cereals annually, ultimately further denting the income of the farmers. Now, when the farmers see that, okay, their crops are going to waste or they do not have any such price discovery mechanism, so what they do? There is obviously the low discovery of price for their product, and ultimately they start doing distress selling. Now, there exists another issue, and that is of poor irrigation facilities. So, for example, majority of the farmers are actually dependent on the monsoon or the monsoonal rainfall for irrigation. The rest of the irrigation which is actually taking place is actually done from the groundwater. So the editorial itself today highlights that how this extensive use of groundwater is actually depleting the very important water table and thus creating the issue of water scarcity. What is the reason for that? The editorial today states that one of the major reasons for that is the kind of freebies which is being provided by the government. So it gives the example of Punjab, where between 1997 to 2002, the irrigation which was being done from the canal source, it declined by 40%. And what was the reason? The reason was free electricity which was being provided by the government. The next is the issue of soil fertility depletion. So the story starts from the Green Revolution of 1960s and 70s, where the extensive use of chemical fertilizers were actually promoted to get high yield for the farmers. But because of this extensive use of chemical fertilizers, it basically led to what? The replacement of organic matter as well as humus content which used to be present naturally in the soil. So that actually led to loss of very beneficial insects germs. At the same time, it led to the deterioration of the soil's natural pH. All of this ultimately led to what? Decline in the productivity. So just look how the fertilizers has increased over the years, and just look how the yield has been declined further. And obviously all these issues will be further aggravated by the impact of climate change, which is already taking place. Almost 3 billion tons of lost harvest since the year of 1964 because of the extreme drought, because of the flash drought which can take place. Now, because of all of these issues, there takes place the high indebtedness among the farmers. Just look at that. The average debt itself stands at 74,000, ultimately leading to the large scale cases of the farmer suicide. So why a new entrepreneur or a young person will actually want to join this particular sector? This is where the editorial today provides certain innovative measures which we can adopt to bring the reforms in the farm sector and thus to reclaim the farm sector. First, it states that we shall expand the irrigation coverage. By doing what? By doing groundwater regulation, rainwater harvesting, and creating micro irrigation structures. For this, it gives the example of Gujarat model, where in the last decade the Gujarat has created around 5 lakh micro irrigation structures, and that has actually led to increase in the crop yield and decline in the production cost. Has our government done anything for this? Yes. Just note down these schemes, such as for example the Krishi Sinchai Yojana, the Har Khet Ko Pani idea, where we are creating the minor irrigation infrastructure. Then we have also, to supply this canal based irrigation, we are creating the river interlinking projects like Ken and Betwa. Then to regulate this groundwater, there is Atal Bhujal Yojana which has been launched. Then the editorial suggests to promote water use efficiency. Now, what it suggests? It suggests to adopt for drip irrigation, for adoption of less water intensive crops, to discard sugarcane, rice, etc. Then there is a 2014 study by government. So it said that if we are going to employ such drip irrigation, it did that in 13 districts, and it find out that the irrigation cost actually declined, and at the same time the yield for vegetables that actually increased by 52%. So for this water efficiency, what the government has done? It has bought Krishi Vikas Yojana. We are creating such drip irrigation structure under this. Then per drop more crop under Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. As well as for the diversification of crop, we have launched International Year of Millets, which was declared by the United Nations, and we are promoting millets which are actually very water sustainable crops. Then for the soil health fixation, the editorial suggests for the diversification of crops, for the impetus on animal husbandry. For this purpose, there is a crop diversification program under the Krishi Vikas Yojana, and the government has launched the National Livestock Mission as well, which we discussed earlier. Then it suggests to use for the technology to aid farmers. How to tackle the climate change, to create heat resistant crops. Very recently, you guys have read about Pusa Ahilya, which is basically a weed that can actually beat the heat by the Indian Council of Agriculture Research. The government is creating Krishi Vigyan Kendras, the Mausam Gram by the Indian Meteorological Department to provide weather information to the farmers. Then for the small land holding, it suggests for cooperative farming and the promotion of farmer producer organization, and that is why the government has launched a central sector scheme to form and promote almost 10,000 FPOs. Also, for this cooperative farming, the Kudumshri model of Kerala can be adopted, under which there is around 74,000 group farmers, and all of them are women. Then the farm and non-farm linkages can be established for agro-processing and ecotourism, and for that purpose, in the budget 2023, the government came up with Agricultural Accelerator Fund to promote the startups in this particular sector, as well as agro-tourism villa scheme of Meghalaya can be replicated as well. So try to attempt this particular question, and we move forward to the next news. The Supreme Court has held that it is going to lay down an all India rules to curtail the use of bulldozers as a form of retribution by the state. This concept of bulldozer justice forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the theme of government policies and interventions. Let's first try to understand what do we mean by bulldozer justice. It is basically a kind of a recent practice which has been adopted by various states, where the demolition of dwellings of accused criminals, or let's say the people who has been accused of inciting a riot or something, that has started taking place, which forms an example of retribution justice theory, which basically states that for any accused, only punishment is an option, and it leaves no scope for reformation of the accused. Remember that there exists no statutory recognition under the Indian laws for this provision of bulldozer justice. Has it become a serious concern? Yes, absolutely. Just look at the numbers here, where 1,50,000 homes has been razed and 7,38,000 people have been left homeless in the last 2 years, specifically targeting the marginalized section of the society. Is there any provision which exists in the local laws? So let's look at the Rajasthan Municipality Act of 2009. The section 245 of which states that anyone who encroaches upon any public land, that can be punished up to 3 years in prison. But first the authority shall give a show cause notice to the offenders. Remember that in Rajasthan, where such bulldozer justice is actually taking place, there is no provision for demolition in any law. The second, let's take example of Madhya Pradesh Municipality Act of 1961. It states that yes, the buildings can be pulled down if they are constructed without permission of the city council. Again, a provision of city show cause notice exists here as well. But there exists no kind of provision or the word which says demolition. At the same time, there also exists a provision for appeal. You can appeal first to the city council. Now let's look at the UP Urban Planning and Development Act of 1973. The section 27 of which actually empowers the Tehsildar of the region to order for the demolition of an illegal construction only, not the construction by an accused or something. And that shall be done within 15 days of order, the order passed by the Tehsildar. And such order, the act says that it shall not be questioned in any court. So what was the Supreme Court's observation on this idea of bulldozer justice, where the appeals from various states were actually being considered? The Supreme Court held that there is no provision as such in law, and that is why such act by the state actually act as a violative of Article 14, because it violates the procedure prescribed by the law. The Supreme Court also observed that in many of the cases, such act has been actually targeting the marginalized section of the society, and it has actually violated their right to free and fair trial under Article 21. There is also an ethical issue involved because it violates the Rawls theory of social justice. So let's say I have committed the crime, I should be held guilty and should be punished. But you are breaking my home, so you are actually punishing a lot of other people. That is violating the theory of social justice. So the Supreme Court held that how can anybody's house be demolished only because he is an accused and the crime has not yet proven. So the Supreme Court has said that it is going to lay down a pan-India norms which will be followed related to this aspect. So keep this in mind and we move forward to the next news, where we are going to discuss about the non-banking financial companies, which forms an important component of your prelims paper under the theme of economy. The reason being that the education loan assets under management of these NBFCs is actually expected to grow with a significant number of 40 to 45% and cross 60,000 crores in this year itself. Let's try to understand what is a non-banking financial company. As per the guideline which has been provided by the Reserve Bank of India, it states that a non-banking financial company is basically a company which is registered under the Section 3 of Companies Act 1956, which is actually engaged in the business of what? In the business of providing loans and advances, acquisition of shares and bonds, leasing or hire purchasing, or in insurance business or chit business, but it does not include any such institution whose principal business, keep this in mind, principal business is agricultural activity, industrial activity, purchase or sale of goods other than any securities. The securities such as, for example, it can be government security or the kind of the stocks which you guys are trading on the any app, or the construction of immovable property. Now, you guys might be wondering, okay, what does this principal business means? So, a company will be held to be having a principal business in any of this if the company's financial asset constitutes more than 50% of the total assets and the income from these financial assets constitute more than 50% of their gross income. So, if they are having 50% of financial assets or for example 50% of the income from these assets, then that will be held as a principal business. Now, how these NBFCs are different from the bank? What they cannot do? First of all, they cannot accept any demand deposits. They do not form the part of payment and settlement system maintained by RBI, thus they cannot issue check which are drawn on itself. And the deposit insurance facility of the Deposit Insurance Guarantee Corporation, that is also not available to the depositors of NBFC. So if you are keeping your money in NBFC, please be very careful. Just look here how the regulation of NBFC is done. So there are certain NBFCs which are registered with RBI. Then there are certain NBFCs which are regulated by other regulators as well, such as, for example, the housing finance institutions are regulated by National Housing Bank, or the venture capital fund is regulated by SEBI. The Nidhi companies are regulated by Ministry of Corporate Affairs. The chit fund companies are regulated by state government. Then there are certain non-banking, non-financial companies, and they are regulated by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So keep this in mind and we move forward to the next section of the news, where we are going to cover some very interesting news which can actually help you to eliminate some important statements in your prelims examination. And the first news actually deals with the Aparajita Bill of 2024, which actually aims to amend the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita and the POCSO Act. The bill has actually been passed by the West Bengal because of the kind of the heinous crime which has been committed against the women in that state. What the bill is actually envisaging? It is actually envisaging to amend some important sections of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita which deals with the punishment to the rape. Normally, under the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, the punishment for the rape extends from 10 to 20 years to the capital punishment, but as per the Aparajita bill, it shall be converted to the capital punishment altogether. Also, it is asking to provide life imprisonment or death sentence for the penetrative sex assault if committed against any children. The second news actually deals with the Jaipur Pink City. The Jaipur Pink City, which is basically a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the site was actually recognized for its town planning and architecture. Keep this in mind that very recently in the last year there were 2 additions to the UNESCO World Heritage Site, and that was asked in the prelims examination. Can you guys tell how many sites currently form the part of UNESCO World Heritage list? Now remember that this Jaipur is not the only city to be recognized for its town planning and ancient architecture. There is another city, and that is Ahmedabad. The city of Jaipur was established in the year of 1727 under the patronage of Savai Jai Singh II. And also this city is very famous for the roads which intersect each other at 90-degree angles, just like the cities of Indus Valley civilization, creating large public squares called as chowpars. And the major places which you guys need to remember for the Jaipur are mentioned here, such as, for example, Amber Fort, the Galta Monkey Temple, the bazaars of Jaipur which are famous, the Nahargarh Fort, the Hawa Mahal there, the Govind Dev Ji Temple. So remember these prominent places in Jaipur. The third news is about the Zero FIR, or the First Information Report, which can be registered in any police station irrespective of jurisdiction. That is why it is called as a Zero FIR. Such Zero FIR was first suggested by the Justice Verma Committee of 2012, and in the Lalita Kumari case 2014, the Supreme Court held that such Zero FIR becomes mandatory when there is a cognizable offense. So let's say some crime has been committed against me, I can just go to any police station and I can just file a Zero FIR there. Why? Because it will actually allow me to lodge the complaint quickly and conveniently, and it will also save the tampering of evidences which can be done. Now, when I have registered this Zero FIR, then the police will register a new FIR and it will transfer it to the relevant police station for immediate action. The last news today is about the biotechnology for development and explained article. So, basically what is biotechnology? It is manipulating the biological organism to develop the desired product. Very recently, the Department of Biotechnology is going to create a kind of a factory to make enzyme which is responsible for the production of 2G ethanol, something which we discussed in the last lecture. Just to test your memory here, how many of you without searching can actually tell what was the name of that enzyme which is actually responsible for the fermentation process and for the creation of 2G ethanol? Now, there are several benefits of biotechnology which has been actually mentioned in the today's explained article. So just let's have a quick look at that. The first is that by use of this biotechnology, we can actually develop animal-free milk with the same nutritional capacity. We can also create bioplastics such as, for example, polylactic acid that is biodegradable as well as we can use algae and bacteria to capture the carbon dioxide and thus reduce down the greenhouse gas emissions as well. So these are the potential benefits of biotechnology. Keep them in your mind. And with this, we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation and thank you.